The revelation landed in the silent room with the force of a physical blow. The foreclosure notice, stark and official beneath the warm lamplight, seemed to mock Karen with its bureaucratic indifference. Every word, every stamped date and legal clause was a testament to her own callousness. She had done this. Her complaint, born of suburban pique and a sense of entitlement, had been the catalyst. The fines for the treehouse, Lily's castle, and the road and the warning sign were not just arbitrary penalties. They were the final, crushing weights that would drag this man under. Eli turned from tucking the blanket around Leo, his movements slow, as if his bones ached with a weariness that went far beyond the night's exertions. He saw where she was looking. His face, already etched with grief, hardened into a mask of stoic resignation. There was no flash of anger, no accusation in his eyes. There was only a profound, quiet shame, the shame of a man who felt he had failed in his most sacred duty. To protect his home, the last bastion of his family's memory. Don't, he said, his voice a low rumble. It wasn't a command, but a plea. He didn't want her pity. He didn't want her apologies. He just wanted her to stop looking at the evidence of his ruin, but Karen couldn't look away. The paper was a mirror, and in it, she saw a reflection of herself she didn't recognize and couldn't bear. The powerful, put-together woman who chaired charity galas and intimidated contractors was gone. In her place was someone small and ugly and destructive, the fines. She began, her voice a choked whisper. From the county office. The woman, Carol Redding, she called you because of me. Eli walked over to the fireplace and picked up the iron poker, needlessly stoking the flames. The firelight danced across his grim face. It doesn't matter. It was coming anyway. The bank, things have been hard for a while. No, Karen insisted, taking a step forward. Her mind was racing, trying to process the scale of her transgression. She hadn't just complained about a fence line. She had, in her ignorance and arrogance, targeted the most vulnerable pressure points of a grieving man's life and squeezed with the full, impersonal weight of the government. No, I'll call them. I'll fix it. I'll tell them it was a mistake, a misunderstanding. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped Eli's lips. You think it works like that? You think you can just call up the county and erase it? You set the gears in motion, Mrs. Brewster. That machine doesn't have a reverse. He finally turned to look at her, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of the raw anger he'd been suppressing. You wanted your view. You wanted your perfect, uninterrupted slice of the country. You just didn't want the man who was already living in it. His words hit their mark. She flinched as if struck. Because it was true. She had seen him as an obstacle, a rustic annoyance. His hand-painted sign, his overgrown fence, his very existence was a blemish on the pristine vision she had for her new life. I didn't know, she stammered, the excuse sounding feeble and pathetic even to her own ears. About your daughter. About any of this. That's the point, Eli said, his voice dropping again, the anger receding into that vast, tired ocean of sorrow. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You just saw a nail that was sticking up and decided to hammer it down. He gestured around the room, at the drawings, at the teddy bear, at the empty spaces filled with ghosts. This isn't just land, Mrs. Brewster. It's everything that's left. Leo stirred on the sofa, murmuring in his sleep. The sound immediately broke the tension. Eli's focus softened, the protective father instinct overriding everything else. He gently adjusted the blanket again. Karen stood paralyzed, caught in a vortex of guilt. She had to do something. The thought of paying the fines was a fleeting, easy solution. She could write a check. A big one. She had money, that was how she solved problems. But she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that it wasn't about the money. Not for him. Giving him money would be another insult, another way of asserting her power, of treating his life and his loss as a simple transaction. The road is still flooded, she said, her voice finding a new, steadier tone. It was the voice she used when a business deal was collapsing, the voice of practical, urgent problem solving. We can't leave. The power is out. My cell has no service. Eli nodded, his gaze distant. The storm's supposed to break by morning. The water will recede. the road, it'll be a few days before it's passable. Then we're stuck here." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. They were trapped. Not just by the storm, but by the wreckage she had created between them. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shrug. "There's a guest room." It was Lily's room. "You and the boy can stay there." The offer, so simple and so profound, was another twist of the knife. He was offering her his daughter's bed. The thought of sleeping in that sacred space, surrounded by the memories of the child whose father she was inadvertently destroying, was unbearable. "We can't. I'll sleep on the floor. Here. By the fire." Eli looked at her, his eyes holding a complex, unreadable expression. He seemed to see past her expensive, ruined clothes and her panicked facade to the frantic scrambling of her conscience beneath. He gave a slow nod. "Fine." The hours that followed were a long, strange purgatory. The storm raged on, a constant, violent soundtrack to the quiet, suffocating tension inside the farmhouse. Eli moved with a practiced economy of motion, checking the seals on the windows, adding logs to the fire, a silent sentinel in his own home. He was a gracious host and a captive in the same breath. Karen, meanwhile, felt like an intruder, an alien species. She found a first aid kit and clumsily cleaned and bandaged a cut on her arm she hadn't even noticed she'd gotten. She tried to help, to tidy up the water she dripped on the floor, but her movements felt awkward, her presence a desecration. Every object in the house seemed to scream a story she had no right to hear. A framed photo on the mantelpiece showed a smiling, vibrant woman with kind eyes, Sarah, she presumed, standing next to Eli, their arms around a young girl with bright pigtails and a gap-toothed grin. Lily. The three of them looked so happy. So complete, rooted to this very spot. She made her way to the kitchen, needing to do something, anything, with her hands. She saw the skillet Eli had been scrubbing when she'd first called, an eternity ago. She started to wash it, the simple, domestic act feeling utterly foreign. Eli came in, stopping in the doorway. He watched her for a moment. "The inspector is coming," Karen said, not turning around. "When the storm clears." "A man named Henderson, I think," she said. "Oh no. I will be here when he comes," she stated. "I will explain everything. I will tell him I made a false report. I will tell him I trespassed, that I drove past your warning, that this was all my fault. And he'll write it all down in his little report," Eli said, his voice flat. "And he'll still hand me the fines. And the bank will still take my house. No. There has to be a way." She turned off the water, her hands dripping into the sink. "My husband, he's a developer. He knows people. He knows lawyers, people in the county office." She trailed off, realizing how it sounded. She was falling back on her old playbook, using her husband's power and influence to fix her messes. Eli's expression didn't change. "I don't want your husband's lawyers, Mrs. Brewster. It's Karen." The correction was instinctive, a desperate plea for some sliver of humanity to pass between them. "My name is Karen." He didn't acknowledge it. He just looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "You should get some rest. Morning will come soon enough." He turned and walked back into the living room, leaving her alone with the ghosts in the kitchen. Sleep was impossible. Karen lay on the floor, wrapped in a coarse wool blanket Eli had given her, staring into the dying embers of the fire. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the submerged headlights of her SUV. She heard Leo's terrified screams. She saw the foreclosure notice. But most of all, she saw Eli's face, the deep, abiding sorrow in his eyes. She had always believed in clear lines, in rules, in consequences. If you worked hard, you succeeded. If you broke the rules, you paid the price. But this was different. The consequences of her actions were not proportional to the crime. She had committed a misdemeanor of character, of class, and the sentence was being served by an innocent man. The storm began to subside in the pre-dawn hours. The violent drumming of the rain softened to a steady patter, and the wind's howl died down to a low moan. A sliver of pale, grey light began to illuminate the edges of the windows. Quietly, Karen got up. Leo was still fast asleep on the sofa, his breathing deep and even. Eli was slumped in the old armchair, his head tilted back, finally having succumbed to exhaustion. He looked vulnerable in sleep, the hard lines of his face softened, making him look younger, closer to the smiling man in the photograph. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't face him in the morning light. She couldn't bear to see the county inspector arrive, to watch the final, formal act of destruction she had set in motion. She had to do something drastic. Something that went beyond apologies and offers of money. She had to dismantle the machine she had turned on. On a piece of paper from a notepad by the phone, she wrote a short, simple note. I am so sorry. I'm going to fix this. Don't worry about Leo. He's safe with me. It was wholly inadequate, but it was all she had. She left it on the table, next to the foreclosure notice. Then, she did the hard. The rain was relentless, a percussive drumming on the tin roof of Eli's small, isolated farmhouse. It had been coming down for 3 days straight, turning his 10 acres of property into a soupy, primordial mire. The dirt road leading from the main highway, a road he'd carved out of the earth himself 2 decades ago, was now a treacherous river of mud. The pond at the bottom of the long, sloping drive, usually a placid, shimmering mirror reflecting the Georgia pines, had swelled into a churning, brown beast, greedily swallowing its banks. Eli stood at his kitchen sink, scrubbing a cast-iron skillet with a kind of grim determination. He was a man etched by the elements, his face a roadmap of sun and worry, his hands calloused and strong. He'd built this life with those hands, built it for his wife, Sarah, and their daughter, Lily. Built it to be a sanctuary, a quiet corner of the world where the noise and chaos of civilization couldn't reach them. The shrill, insistent ring of the landline cut through the sound of the storm. Eli's shoulders tensed. No one called the landline. Not anymore. His cell phone, like most modern conveniences, was a fickle servant out here, its signal a ghost that came and went with the weather. But the landline was a direct tether to the outside world, a world he tried so hard to keep at a distance. He dried his hands on a faded dish towel and picked up the receiver. Hello. Is this Eli Vance? The voice was female, brisk, and dripping with an authority that immediately set his teeth on edge. It is. This is Carol Redding, from the county planning office. A pause, as if she expected the name to mean something to him. It didn't. Mr. Vance, we've received a complaint about an unpermitted structure on your property. Eli's grip on the phone tightened. He glanced out the window, past the rain-swept porch, to the small, beautifully crafted treehouse nestled in the branches of a giant oak. Lily's castle. Her fortress. The last thing he'd ever built for her. A structure. Yes. A rather large, well, the complainant described it as a treehouse. Our records show no permit was ever filed for such a structure. According to County Ordinance 7.14, any ancillary dwelling exceeding 50 square feet requires a full structural and zoning review. The bureaucratic jargon was a foreign language, an invasive species in his carefully cultivated world. It's a treehouse. For my daughter. Be that as it may, rules are rules, Mr. Vance. We also have a report about an unapproved private road. The complainant alleges your access road is causing significant runoff and erosion onto adjacent properties. Eli's blood began to simmer. He knew exactly who the complainant was. Karen Brewster. The woman who'd bought the 10-acre plot next to his 6 months ago, a developer's wife from Atlanta who saw the countryside not as a home, but as a blank canvas for her McMansion dreams. She'd driven her gleaming white SUV up his road twice, uninvited, to complain about the state of his fence line. My road's been here for 20 years, Eli said, his voice low and steady. Never had a problem. As for the runoff, this is the worst storm we've seen in a decade. The whole county's flooded. The complainant seems to feel your road is exacerbating the issue, Carol Redding said, her tone dismissive. She also mentioned a hand-painted sign at the entrance to your property. Danger, road washed out. Is that correct? It is. Because the road is washed out. It's not safe. Well, that sign is also a violation, Mr. Vance. Unofficial signage is prohibited. If the road is a hazard, you're required to report it to the county, and we will dispatch a team to assess it. You can't just put up your own signs. A vein throbbed in Eli's temple. With all due respect, I don't have time for this. My property is flooding. I'm trying to protect my home. And I'm trying to do my job, she retorted, her voice hardening. A county inspector will be out to assess the situation as soon as the storm lets up. You'll be fined for the unpermitted structure, the unapproved road, and the illegal sign. I'd advise you to have the treehouse dismantled immediately. The line went dead. Eli stood there, the dial tone buzzing in his ear like an angry hornet. Dismantle it. The word was a physical blow. He saw Lily's face, her eyes shining with excitement as he'd hoisted the final wall into place. He heard her laughter, a sound that was now just a phantom echo in the quiet rooms of the house. He slammed the phone down, the plastic cracking under the force. The anger was a hot, molten thing, burning through the carefully constructed walls of his grief. For 2 years, he'd been treading water in an ocean of loss, the quiet routine of the farm his only life raft. Now, this woman, this stranger, was trying to sink him. The rain intensified, hammering against the windows. He walked into the living room, the floorboards creaking under his weight. The room was neat, tidy, but it felt preserved. Sarah's favorite quilt was folded over the back of the sofa. Lily's drawings were still taped to the wall, vibrant splashes of color in the otherwise muted room. He ran a hand over the rough, crayon-textured paper, his finger tracing the outline of a smiling sun. He wouldn't let them take this. Not this. He pulled on his heavy-duty rain slicker and work boots, his movements jerky and efficient. He grabbed a high-powered flashlight from the hall closet and stepped out onto the porch. The wind tore at him, whipping the rain into his face like tiny needles. The world was a maelstrom of wind and water, the familiar landscape transformed into something wild and hostile. His first priority was the generator. If the power went out, the sump pump in the basement would fail, and the house would be next. He sloshed through the ankle-deep water covering the yard, the beam of his flashlight cutting a shaky path through the deluge. The generator, housed in a small shed, coughed to life with a reassuring roar. Next, the road. He had to reinforce the warning. The simple sign he'd put up was clearly not enough for people like Karen Brewster. He trudged up the long, muddy incline of the driveway, the thick, cloying mud sucking at his boots with every step. The rain was so heavy it was hard to breathe, hard to see. He reached the top of the drive, where his property met the paved county road. His sign was still there, nailed to a post, the red paint of the word danger bleeding in the rain. But as his flashlight beam swept across the entrance, he saw it. Fresh tire tracks. Deep, wide, aggressive treads. They sliced through the mud, bypassing his sign, and heading straight down his washed-out road. A cold dread, colder than the rain, seeped into his bones. It was the white SUV. He was sure of it. What in God's name was she doing, you stupid, arrogant woman, he muttered, the wind snatching the words from his lips. He knew where she was going. There was only one place the road led, to the clearing at the far end of his property, the one with the panoramic view of the valley. The spot where she wanted to build her house, the spot she'd tried to buy from him, the spot he would never, ever sell. It was Sarah's favorite place, but to get there, she'd have to pass the pond. He started to run, slipping and sliding in the treacherous mud. The roar of the storm was deafening, but underneath it, he thought he could hear another sound. A high-pitched, mechanical whine. An engine straining, fighting a losing battle. He broke through the tree line, and his flashlight beam found it. The white SUV was no longer on the road. It was in the pond. The front half of the vehicle was completely submerged, its nose buried in the murky, churning water. The rear wheels were spinning uselessly, flinging mud and water into the air. The taillights glowed an eerie, demonic red beneath the surface, and then he heard it. A scream. A human scream, thin and terrified, swallowed almost immediately by the storm. For a split second, he froze. A dark, ugly part of him, a part he hadn't known existed, whispered, she got what she deserved. She'd ignored his warning. She'd trespassed on his land. She'd threatened his home, his memories. But the scream came again, and this time, it was followed by another sound. A child's cry. The ugly thought vanished, vaporized by a surge of pure, primal adrenaline. He plunged into the yard, his long legs eating up the distance to the pond. The water was a frigid shock, rising instantly to his waist. The current was strong, pulling at him, trying to drag him under. "I'm coming," he yelled, his voice raw. "Hold on." He reached the SUV. The driver's side door was open and Karen Brewster was clinging to it, her face a mask of pale terror. Her expensive-looking clothes were soaked and mud-stained, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair plastered to her skull. "Help me," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "My son. He's in the back." Eli didn't waste time with words. He pushed past her, peering into the dark, water-filled interior of the car. The water was up to the level of. The name Alistair Davenport landed in the damp morning air with the chilling finality of a gavel strike. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was an instrument of the bank, the polished, human face of the institutional greed that was poised to swallow Eli's world whole. Karen stared at him, the muddy highway shoulder suddenly feeling like the edge of a precipice. She hadn't just failed to fix her mistake, she had gift-wrapped the final piece of the puzzle for the people who wanted Eli. "Gone, recalcitrant tenants." Karen repeated, the words tasting like acid. "He's not a tenant. He owns that land. He built his life there." Davenport's smile didn't reach his eyes. They were the color of a winter sky, cold and assessing. A semantic distinction. "Mrs. Brewster. When a mortgage is in default, the bank, as the lien holder, has a vested interest in the property's value. An interest that is significantly undermined by unpermitted structures, code violations, and potential liability issues. Your complaint, as it happens, was the final piece of documentation we needed to expedite the foreclosure on grounds of contractual breach. So, on behalf of my client, thank you." The thank you was a stiletto, slipped expertly between her ribs. She had been their pawn. Her petty grievance, amplified by the grinding gears of bureaucracy, had become their legal justification. The county inspector, Henderson, shifted uncomfortably. This was clearly beyond his pay grade. He was here to measure a treehouse and cite a sign, not to witness a corporate assassination. "Mr. Davenport, the lady here is saying she made a false report." "Is she?" Davenport's gaze slid back to Karen, slick and dismissive. "Under duress, perhaps. After spending a night in the home of the man she reported. It's not an uncommon tactic. Intimidation. Coercion." He looked at Leo, who was huddled against Karen's side, clutching the colorful Afghan. "I see. He even has your son wrapped in his belongings. A bit theatrical, don't you think?" The insinuation was monstrous. It was so far from the quiet dignity Eli had shown them that Karen felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. "You son of a bitch," she breathed, taking a step forward. "He saved my son's life. He pulled us out of a pond after I ignored his warning and nearly got us both killed. He gave us shelter. He is a better man than you could ever hope to be." Davenport remained unfazed, his composure a suit of impenetrable armor. "A compelling story. I'm sure it will make for a very moving, though legally irrelevant, testimony. Now, if you'll excuse us, Mr. Henderson and I have an inspection to conduct." He gestured towards Eli's road. Henderson looked trapped. "Sir, the road's completely washed out. My truck can't make it." "Then we'll walk," Davenport said without a moment's hesitation, his expensive leather shoes a comical contrast to the sea of mud before them. He was a predator who would not be deterred from the scent of blood. "No." Karen's voice was sharp, desperate. She was losing control, and she knew it was playing right into his hands, painting her as the hysterical woman he wanted her to be. "You can't go down there. He doesn't know you're coming." "That's rather the point of an inspection, isn't it?" Davenport said smoothly. He started walking, picking his way along the edge of the muddy track with a surprising agility. Henderson hesitated, then shot Karen an apologetic look. "My hands are tied. I have to file my report." He followed Davenport, his orange vest a beacon of bureaucratic surrender. Karen watched them go, a feeling of utter helplessness washing over her. She had tried to run ahead of the problem, and instead, she had become the welcoming party for the firing squad. She looked down at Leo, whose small face was filled with confusion and fear. She had to get him away from this. She had to get back to Eli. "Come on, sweetie," she said, her voice strained. Her mad dash through the woods had been for nothing. Now, she had to go back into the heart of the disaster she'd created. The walk back down the drive was a nightmare of shame. Davenport and Henderson were several yards ahead, their conversation a low murmur that drifted back to her on the still air. They were two cogs in a machine, one callous, the other compliant, turning in perfect, destructive harmony. As they rounded the final bend and the farmhouse came into view, she saw Eli. He was on the porch, a thermos in his hand. His posture rigid. He had seen them. He watched them approach, his face an unreadable mask, but Karen could feel his sense of violation from 50 yards away. His sanctuary invaded, Davenport strode onto the wet lawn as if he owned it, stopping a respectful but firm distance from the porch. Henderson hovered behind him, clipboard in hand, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. "Mr. Vance," Davenport began, his voice projecting clearly in the quiet morning. "My name is Alistair Davenport. I'm an attorney with Sterling Financial. This is Mr. Henderson from the County Planning Office. I believe you're expecting him." Eli's gaze flickered past them, landing on Karen and Leo as they emerged from behind the men. The look in his eyes was not one of anger, but of a deep, profound disappointment. It was the look of a man who had extended a hand in kindness only to have it slapped away. He saw her, flanked by the very forces she had unleashed, and drew the most obvious, painful conclusion: she had betrayed him. "I see you found your way out," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He looked at the Afghan wrapped around Leo. "You can keep the blanket." The coldness of his words hurt more than any shouting match could have. He thought she had run off, called the authorities, and brought them back to finish the job. "Eli, no," Karen pleaded, rushing forward. "It's not what it looks like. I found them on the road. I tried to stop them." Davenport cut her off with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Mr. Vance, if we could stick to the matter at hand. Mr. Henderson is here to conduct a formal inspection of the property to verify the complaints filed yesterday. Specifically, regarding an unpermitted residential structure and an unapproved access road." Eli's jaw tightened. He set the thermos down slowly, deliberately. "There's the treehouse," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. He nodded towards the magnificent oak. "And you're standing on the road. Help yourself." He didn't move from the porch. He wasn't going to participate in this farce, but he wouldn't obstruct it either. He would bear witness to the dismantling of his life with a dignity they couldn't touch. Henderson, looking miserable, began his work. He trudged over to the oak tree, taking out a measuring tape. He took pictures with his phone. He made notes on his clipboard. Every click of his phone's camera felt like an act of violence. Meanwhile, Davenport circled the house, his sharp eyes missing nothing. He noted the peeling paint on a window frame, a loose shingle on the porch roof, the general state of wear. That spoke not of neglect, but of a man with more pressing burdens than cosmetic upkeep. Karen knew what he was doing, documenting decay, building his case that Eli was an unfit steward of the bank's asset. "Mr. Vance," Davenport called out, his tone deceptively casual. "My client is prepared to be generous. We understand. Foreclosure is an unpleasant process. We are willing to offer you a cash for keys settlement. You sign over the deed, vacate the property within 7 days, and we will give you $5,000. It's more than you'll get after the sheriff's auction." It was the ultimate insult. A pittance, a bribe to get him to abandon his home, his history, his wife and daughter's memories, without a fight. Before Eli could respond, Karen snapped. $5,000. For this. For 20 years of his life. Are you out of your mind? Davenport finally turned his full attention to her. "Mrs. Brewster, you are a party to this only insofar as you are a witness for the county. This is a private financial matter. I suggest you stay out of it." "I'm the reason you're here," she shot back, her voice ringing with a conviction she hadn't felt in years. "My complaint, my fines. This is my fault. And I will not let you do this." She marched up to Henderson, who was now examining the base of the treehouse. "Is this structure unsafe?" she demanded. Henderson looked flustered. "Well, I'm not a structural engineer, but from a code perspective, it lacks the proper footings and permits. Is it going to fall down?" Karen pressed. "Does it pose a threat to anyone?" No, it looks very well made, actually. But the rules and the road, she continued, turning to gesture at the muddy track. Did it cause my brand new six-figure SUV to sink into a pond, or did that happen because I drove like an idiot past a sign that explicitly warned me not to? Henderson stammered, speechless. He looked to Davenport for help. Davenport stepped forward, his patience finally beginning to fray. Her histrionics are irrelevant. The violations are a matter of public record. Then I'll pay them, Karen declared. The fines, whatever they are, I will pay them right now. Davenport laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. You think this is about a few $1,000s in fines? This property is worth 10 times what Vance owes on it, especially now that the new resort development has been approved for the adjacent valley. My client isn't interested in his late mortgage payments. They are interested in the land. The foreclosure is happening. Your complaint simply gave us the legal leverage to do it quickly, before he could declare bankruptcy or tie us up in court. 4 years. The final piece clicked into place. The resort. That's what this was about. Karen's husband had mentioned it. A massive, luxury development project was coming to the area. Eli's 10 acres, with its panoramic view of the Val. The splash echoed in the unnaturally still air, a sound disproportionately small for the magnitude of the act. The ripples widened, distorted the reflection of the grey sky, and then vanished. The clipboard was gone, swallowed by the same murky water that held Karen's SUV, a second monument to a catastrophic error in judgment. But this one was intentional. This one was a crime. Eli skidded to a stop at the edge of the pond, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. What did you do? He whispered, the words ragged. He wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the spot where the clipboard had disappeared, as if he could will it to float back to the surface. Karen's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. Her breath came in short, sharp gusts. The adrenaline that had propelled her into action receded, leaving behind a cold, terrifying clarity. She had just committed a felony. Tampering with evidence. Obstruction of a county investigation. The clinical, legal terms scrolled through her mind, each one a brick in the wall of a prison cell. I had to, she stammered, turning to face him. Her entire body was trembling. He said it himself. The report was his leverage. Without it, what does he have? He has a sworn officer of the county who will testify that you, a mud-covered, hysterical woman, assaulted him and stole county property before destroying it. Eli's voice, which had been so controlled, so dangerously quiet, finally broke, rising in a tide of panicked frustration. You haven't fixed anything, Karen. You've just made it 1,000 times worse. You haven't just handed them a reason to take my house. You've given them a reason to arrest us both. The us hung in the air between them. It wasn't an us of alliance, it was an us of shared catastrophe. She had chained herself to his sinking ship, Mama. Leo's small voice cut through the tension. He stood 10 yards away, his small face pale, the bright colors of the Afghan a stark contrast to the bleak landscape. He knew something terrible had just happened. The raw emotion in the adult voices was a language any child could understand. Karen's gaze snapped to her son. The reality of what she'd risked crashed down on her. Her freedom. Her ability to be with him. She had acted out of a desperate, maternal instinct to fix a wrong, and in doing so, had jeopardized the very thing she was supposed to protect, her child's security. Eli saw the look on her face, the shift from defiance to utter, soul-crushing fear. He saw Leo, a lone figure clutching a blanket that belonged to a dead child. The anger in his own face faltered, replaced by the familiar, crushing weight of responsibility. This mess, his mess, had now entangled a child. He raked a hand through his hair, turning his back to her and pacing a short, frantic line on the muddy bank. He was thinking, his mind racing past the panic, searching for a foothold, a strategy. He was a man used to solving problems with his hands, with practical solutions. Fending off a slick corporate lawyer and a felony charge was like trying to build a house in a hurricane. Okay, he said, his back still to her. Okay. Think. They'll be back. Davenport isn't the kind of man who lets something like this go. Henderson will report his clipboard stolen. They won't just call the sheriff, they'll come back with him. He turned around, his eyes locking onto hers. The fury was gone, replaced by a grim, reluctant pragmatism. How long were you with them on the road? The question was so unexpected it took Karen a moment to process it. What? I don't know. 5 minutes. Maybe 10. Did you touch him? Henderson. No. I yelled at him. Demanded to know if the treehouse was unsafe. But you didn't make physical contact. No, she confirmed, shaking her head. Good, Eli breathed. Then it's not assault. It's just your word against his. Hysterical woman versus county officer. He looked towards the highway. They walked. It'll take them 15 minutes to get back to their cars. Then they'll call it in. The nearest sheriff's station is in Clarksville. 30-minute drive on a good day. With the roads like this. 45. Best case scenario, we have an hour. Maybe less. He was no longer the victim. He was a field general, assessing the terrain, calculating enemy movements, counting down the minutes until the siege began. The transformation was startling. Karen realized that the quiet, grieving farmer was only one facet of this man. Beneath it lay a core of resilient, intelligent steel. An hour for what? She asked, her voice trembling. An hour to make your story plausible, he said, already moving, his long strides carrying him back towards the house. And to get that monstrosity out of my pond. He jabbed a finger towards her sunken SUV. Karen and Leo hurried to follow him. What does my car have to do with anything? Everything, he said, not breaking stride. Davenport saw it. He knows you were here all night. He knows you drove into the pond. His narrative is that you were here, I intimidated you, and you're now acting under duress. My narrative has to be that you are exactly what you appear to be, a reckless, panicked woman who had an accident, and I'm just the poor bastard who had the bad luck to have it happen on his property. He led them not to the house, but to a large, dilapidated barn she hadn't paid much attention to before. The doors groaned open, revealing a cavernous space filled with the ghosts of a working farm. Old tools hung on the walls. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light piercing the gloom. In the center of it all sat a massive, old, rust-pocked tractor. It looked like a sleeping iron dinosaur. The story is this, Eli said, his voice echoing in the barn as he began checking fluid levels on the tractor. You drove past my sign last night in the storm. You slid off the road into the pond. You and your son came to my house for help. This morning, you were distraught. You walked up to the road to find help and ran into the county inspector. You were panicked, not thinking straight. You blame my road, my property, for your accident. In a fit of rage, you argued with him, grabbed his clipboard, and threw it in the pond. You weren't trying to help me. You were lashing out, blaming me. Karen stared at him, stunned by the cold, brutal logic of it. He was crafting a new narrative, one that sacrificed her character to save her from a felony and him from a charge of conspiracy. In his version, she wasn't a hero, she was the villain of her own story. It was a lie that felt uncomfortably close to the truth. They'll never believe it, she whispered. They might, Eli countered, climbing into the tractor's seat. He turned the key. The engine sputtered, coughed a plume of black smoke, then roared to life with a deafening clatter. It's better than the truth. The truth has you committing a felony to protect a man you barely know from a foreclosure you caused. It's noble and it's unbelievable. The lie. The lie is simple. Rich woman in a fancy car has an accident, gets hysterical, and blames the local yokel. That's a story people like Davenport love to believe. He put the tractor in gear. The huge machine lurched forward, out of the barn and into the grey light. Why are you helping me? Karen yelled over the engine's roar. I did this. I put you in this position. Why are you trying to protect me? Eli stopped the tractor and looked down at her. His face was grim, shadowed by the brim of a faded baseball cap. Because your son is watching, he said simply. He didn't need to say more. He was a father. Even in his grief, perhaps because of his grief, he could not bear to see another child watch their parent be taken from them. He was protecting Leo, not her. The weight of his words, of his quiet, profound decency, was heavier than any criminal charge. The next hour was a blur of frantic, purposeful activity. Under Eli's direction, they worked with a desperate synergy. He drove the tractor to the edge of the pond, its huge tires sinking deep into the mud. He unspooled a thick, heavy chain from the back. Get in the water, he ordered Karen. You have to hook this to the rear axle. Karen didn't hesitate. She handed Leo the phone she'd retrieved from her car's glove box, now miraculously dry and functional, and told him to sit on the porch and play a game, to not watch. Then she waded back into the frigid, murky water. It felt like a baptism. A penance. The cold was a vicious shock, but she barely felt it. She ducked under the surface, the brown water closing over her head, and fumbled in the dark, her fingers searching for the solid steel of the axle. She found it, looped the heavy chain around it, and secured the hook. Her lungs burning, she surfaced, gasping, and gave Eli a thumbs up. He put the tractor in gear and slowly, carefully, began to pull. The chain went taut. The tractor's engine strained, its wheels spinning, digging deep trenches in the lawn. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a great, sucking groan, the white SUV began to move. It scraped along the bottom of the pond, resisting, fighting, before finally emerging from the water like a resurrected beast, covered in mud and weeds, water pouring from every seam. Eli dragged it 50 yards from the pond, leaving a deep, muddy scar across his lawn. Good, he grunted, shutting off the engine. The sudden silence was jarring. Now it looks like a recovery attempt. Not a drowning. He then grabbed a shovel and a rake and, with Karen's help, they worked on the road near the pond. He instructed her to create scuffs and skid marks leading from the road towards the water. Make it look like you lost control here, he directed, his voice low and urgent. Like you tried to brake, but the mud just took you. They were artists, creating a scene, painting a picture of an accident with mud and tire tracks. They worked in a strange, focused silence, their earlier animosity